long before cities, before maps, before language had anything resembling rules. There was movement and memory and the soft pulse of survival. Life, for 0.7 million years ago, wasn't fast. It wasn't loud. It was a slow rhythm of days lasting just long enough to gather food and discover light. And tonight, we're going to live it. Welcome to another sleepy history story. If this is the kind of calm, curious space you need in your life, subscribe to this channel and let your body settle. As we drift far, far back, our story begins early, before sunrise. Two humans awaken beneath trees, no home but their bones, no wealth but warmth from being near each other. They rise, stretch, and begin walking along a stream in search of roots, berries, and leaves. One finds something sweet and brings it not to their mouth, but to the other. Even then, survival was shaped not only by what could be found, but what could be shared. They didn't discover fire all at once. There was no drum roll, no scream of celebration. There wasn't even a word for it. There was simply a glow, a brief flicker between forgettable moments that lasted just long enough to become something else. It began with two stones, hard, tired, struck not for purpose, but out of restlessness or repetition. Clack, clack, pause. Nothing at first, then dust, then warmth, then the briefest whisper of orange. So shy it might have been mistaken for a trick of light, but this time it stayed. One of them leaned closer. The others watched, not daring to interrupt wonder in its birth. Breath held, eyes wide, everything stilled but the spark itself. And then it caught. The grass beneath it curled in surprise. A twist of smoke seeped upward, gray and ancient. It rose like an invisible thread between the world of dirt and the world beyond understanding. They flinched at first. One began to back away. Another shielded their eyes. A third simply sat, watching fire, not as a tool, not yet, as a message. They didn't know they had made it. They didn't know how to make it again. But they felt it, even without words. Something had changed. That night, the fire didn't cook. It didn't protect. It didn't explain itself. It simply felt good, warmer than body heat, more rhythmic than breath. It shivered in place, flickering and alive, and for the first time in their lives, they gathered because they wanted to, not because they needed to. It brought them together, not as a hunt, not a storm, not a grief, but an invitation. They huddled close, knees bent, hands outstretched. The youngest reached too far and scalded her fingers. She yelped, but no one scolded. She smiled confused and laughed. Ash clung to her skin like dust. She would carry it for days. And one day, years later, she would strike rock against rock and wonder why it felt like remembering. It wasn't long before someone tried feeding it. A dried branch, a twist of palm husk, pieces of bark and moss. No language yet, just motion, gesture, thumbs pointing, eyes asking more, and fire answered by growing taller. Later, someone sang, not on purpose, not a melody, with chorus and bridge, just a sound that filled the silence between pops and crackles. Another voice joined it, then a third. Words weren't born yet, but the idea of togetherness was. The sparks began to lift toward stars that blinked, as if amused, as if watching it happen again and again across continents, centuries, generations of humans, wrapped in furs, around slow-burning flames, who thought they'd discovered something new. Each time, a few fell asleep right there, heads on shoulders, stick still in hand. The fire was small, but enough. It would smolder till morning, warm the skin, and stitch trust silently between people who still barely understood their own names. They didn't write it down. They didn't even name what they had found. But that night under slow stars, something else began to survive. Not just bodies, but stories. If you watched from a distance, you wouldn't hear them. You'd just see glowing arcs. of slow dancing shadows, unfolded legs, and tired eyes, and the very first signs of family. Fire didn't save them. They didn't need saving. But fire became a signal that maybe, for the first time, they were not just surviving, they were living. The fire gave them warmth, but now they needed more. Not just berries, not cracked roots or river fish, but something large enough to carry them through many suns and many moons. They rose early today, following tracks in the mud, like whispers pressed into the earth, the shape of something massive, wider than trees, taller than fear, a creature whose tusks curved like ancient smiles, a being they did not hate, but that they needed. Some tribes called it the giant with 2 mountains on its shoulders. Others dared not name it at all, but all of them respected the silence that followed its footsteps. The air around it settled differently, like the world bent politely to make space. And today, they followed it. The sun rose behind them, like a guard too far to help. The spears were ready, long as shafts, tipped with bones sharpened on stone. Each hunter carried one. Each knew where to stand, where not to speak, because this wasn't just a kill. It was a dance, one known not through stories, but through scars, passed hand to hand, across time. At first, they could only hear it, branches breaking in the distance, rhythmic, measured, like breathing. One of them signaled, a hand low, fingers opening wide. They crouched together behind tall grass. Their breath slowed to match the winds. Then it stepped into view, a beast the size of a room, not angry, not aware, yet its fur hung like draped clouds. Its head moved in rhythms older than the moon, eyes heavy, as if it carried lifetimes behind them. It walked with purpose, not toward them, just forward. That somehow made it harder. This wasn't an enemy. This wasn't a villain. This was something that deserved to live forever. And still, they rose, one through first. The spear arched like a silent comet. It struck, but not deep. The beast flinched, head lurching up, air draining from its chest like thunder. The others stepped forward from the grass. Slow, steady, it turned. Their hearts did, too. Now it saw them, not as trees, not as birds, but as the animals. They were with pointed limbs and eyes that did not run. The ground pulsed with the giant steps. A foot slammed earth, moss and mud lifted. A wind moved sideways across the plain, as if history itself had inhaled. Another spear, another puncture, a final charge. It did not scream. It did not beg. It simply ran. One last rhythm. And then silence again. When the dust cleared, they stood in a wide circle around it. One knelt down, hand on its side, not in victory, but in gratitude, with flint and quiet blade. They worked, not hurried, not greedy. Every piece was cleaned, carried, and offered. They lifted hunks of meat to the sky, placed the heart gently in a bark basin, and buried its eyes beside a tree, so it could keep watching the world. That night, they roasted strips slowly over fire. No one laughed, no one shouted, except the distant owls. When the eldest bit into the first piece, he chewed slowly, swallowed, and whispered, "Thank you." And then everyone ate, together, because survival was not dominance. It was respect. It was knowing that sometimes something must fall, so that many may rise, and it must fall with reverence. The wind tonight carries teeth. It comes sharp, across open plains, and waters chilled by the turn of something bigger than weather. They had fire now, and that was good. But still, fire crouches low. It flickers. It doesn't stop rain, or the long bones of cold that wrap around ankles at dawn. They have warmth. Now they need walls. The first idea of home didn't come from craving comfort. It came from needing not to freeze. A place to sit and eat, without watching the sky too often. A place sheltered not just by stone or branch, but by an understanding. Here's where we stay. At least for now. They began with what they could hold: thick sticks, palm sweeps, woven tangles of vine, built into elbow-shaped structures, pressing against scrub-covered slope. No blueprints, just bodies bent together, mimicking the shape of trees leaning into one another against the wind. An elder removed her cloak and spread it over the first pole, a signal. Use what you have, it seemed to say. Make this sacred with your effort, not with your tools. Then came stone, not carved, just willing, heavy enough to anchor, flat enough to sit beside. Another figure bound animal hide to openings, sealing the draft. As dusk peeled slowly toward them, someone tied knots with their mouth. Their hands were too numb. Still, the knots held. The roof sagged. Twice. They didn't fix the beauty. They fixed the leak. A small hollow was dug out, where smoke could escape up through a split in the firs. It didn't draw perfectly. It didn't glow evenly. But it worked. Good enough was finally enough. And when the structure stood, not tall, but real, they stepped inside together. A low silence filled the space, as one finger reached toward the rafters and touched the crossing lines of wood. It was solid, and it was small, but the kind of small that makes you feel safe, not trapped. There was room for four, and not a whisper more. So they lay shoulder to shoulder, knees overlapping like puzzle pieces shaped by time and temperature. There were no doors, just a flap of woven grass, tied at the edges, with the same fibers they'd once used to carry firewood. Outside, the fire still burned. They could feel its echo, simmering against the wall, and hear the nearby creek muttering low into the night. A dog-like creature howled once, from a ridge in the distance, and the walls caught the sound gently, like ears made of wood. They didn't talk much that night. What was there to say? Only breathing mattered now, and breath came easier. When the rain couldn't find your forehead, and the stars didn't stare too directly into your eyes. One hunter traced a shape into the wall, a spiral, perhaps, or maybe a memory. He didn't explain. He just smiled, and rubbed it smooth again with his palm, before turning to sleep. By morning, 3 more shelters would rise in nearby clearings, each different, each imperfect, all beautiful, in the way hardship turns into warmth, through intention. Shelter was not just survival, it was psychology, laid out in bark and bone, a declaration against a storm that said, "Tonight, you will not take us." And the storm, in return, tiptoed past, because even nature, sometimes, respects those humble enough to build, with open hands, and shared breath. Language didn't always come with sound. Once upon a very long time ago, teaching arrived in the form of movement, gesture, gaze, and trust. Early humans, much like today's, were born with wonder in their eyes and silence on their lips. But they were never confused for long, because the world, even then, knew how to show them what mattered. A child squats low on the edge of a grassy clearing, feet planted firmly, bare toes digging into warm dirt. She's watching a beetle struggle to lift something twice its size, a strip of bark or maybe dried lizard skin, back to a hole beneath a sun-warmed stone. To her, it's not an insect, it's a story. She doesn't blink. Her fingers imitate what it does. She gently presses a rock beside her foot, then drags it, then tries again. Not to win, not to achieve, but to understand. Behind her, an older woman watches. Wrinkled face, arms like tree limbs from years of lifting wood and skinning hides. She doesn't interrupt. She simply observes, then slowly walks forward, reaches down, and chooses a different stone. She kneels beside the girl, doesn't speak. Instead, she lifts the stone, drops it once beside a crack in the earth. A beetle scurries out. The girl gasps, sets her stone beside the elder's gently, resting both hands in the dirt, as if waiting for another lesson to begin. No words pass, just earth and breath and mirrored movement. This is how knowledge began, not taught with explanation, but offered, like a bowl of river water, passed between two cupped hands. You give, you watch, you let it spill, sometimes, but still, the other drinks. Later that day, the child follows the elder to the edge of their encampment. She says nothing still, but now she watches feet, the way the toes curl slightly before a thorn bush, the way the heel skips just before soft silt. She learns the path, not by where it goes, but by how it's walked. As the sun lowers, they sit again. Two fires burn in the distance. The elder begins to draw a wide line in the dirt, with one long, weathered finger, then another, an arc, a jagged peak, an animal paw, a seed, no alphabet, no voice, just shapes from memory and experience, etched into dust, where wind might take them, or not at all. The child grabs a stick, mimics the curve, misses, tries again. The elder smiles, not with triumph, but with trust, because even now, without knowing a word for tomorrow, this child is creating one. Teaching at this time wasn't ceremony. It wasn't formality. It was rhythm, presence, an echo passed forward, from hand to hand, breath to breath, saying quietly, "You will hold the pieces. I no longer can." The child won't remember every line drawn, but her hands will carry the feelings, the way shadow fell beside their fire. As a teaching moment passed unhurried, soft as moss, loud as legacy, this too is survival, not just hunting, eating, running, but remembering, learning, not with questions, but with eyes, and with open palms, ready to shape memory into movement. Again, and again, and again, it began with a single stone, rough in one hand, steady in the other. The first attempt wasn't a breakthrough. It was a click, no spark, no sound of genius, just the collision of two things that had crossed paths millions of times before, but now meant something. They would sit alone, or in threes, legs folded beneath them, as the tools slowly took shape, not because they understood form, but because they understood function. A flake chipped just right could pierce. A notch angled carefully could scrape. A sharpened edge could split, flesh from hide, or a root from soil. And so they chipped, and chipped again. The first song they ever learned might have been clack, pause, clack, adjust, breathe, clack. It wasn't trial and error. It was participation, a rhythm, a slow, sacred guessing game, with nature's patience. Stone offered no forgiveness, only feedback. And with time, stone began to speak. They learned that obsidian whispered clean, that flint fractured best when your hands were warm, that river rocks grown too smooth had forgotten how to break. They knew to strike one edge, not another, to hold their breath midship, to steady their wrist, to listen, not just with ears, but with the pads of their fingers. Because the moment a tool became real, you felt it like lightning, only slower. No blade was perfect, but each had a story. You crafted this, the tool silently says, because survival demanded an answer, and you dare to give one. Some began collecting chips, tiny flakes of past mistakes, and wore them in pouches, not as shame, but as reminder. Each flake held a moment of learning, a bruise earned, a cut taken, a line of blood that remembered better than pride ever could. And so a new kind of memory was born, not in fires, not in footsteps, but in edge, memory with a handle. Back at the shelter, one of them sits in the pale gold of late afternoon, watching how the blade shadows against the ground near her toes. She turns it slowly in the fading light, studying the angle she carved, a loop of satisfaction forming faint in her chest. Then she rests it gently on a stone slab beside her, like an offering, for the next who needs it. Sometimes two sit together, chiseling in silence. They don't speak, but back and forth. The chips fall, and between them grows a mountain of discarded rock. That, to them, feels like a tower of steps, not failures, fragments of fire in waiting. And when the time to hunt comes again, when the forest sends wind as warning, or the tracks grow fresh with morning rain, they lift the tools, not with hesitation, but with understanding. These are not weapons. They are choices, sharpened by need, tempered by breath. The tip of the spear says, "You worked for this moment. You shaped your safety." The blade against root says, "You remembered what worked and repeated it until it loved you back." There are no signatures, no labels, only hands. Hands that know stone, better than fear. Hands that echo hands that came before them, and carve a future without knowing where it leads. And in that moment, with a single clean chip spiraling toward the ground, something permanent is etched. That humans were not just surviving, they were creating. Before there were numbers, before there were maps, before anything called time, there was a sky, and at night it opened, soft, endless, dark, but filled with something that wanted to be understood, even if only through silence. They didn't use the word stars. They had no use for such precision. No, they saw them as eyes, lights watching, slowly turning. Ancestors, perhaps. Signals, stories, questions, the great beyond. Quiet, sure, steady, they would lie on their backs after fire had cooled, limbs resting on soft grass and worn shoulders, and just look up. No words, just breath, just awareness. The child would point, a hand small and hesitant, tracing the slow arc of one blinking light. The elder would nod, then point to another, slowly without needing names. They created constellations, not to name the heavens, but to ground themselves. Beneath them, one figure walked each night, to the same place, a smooth rock half submerged just beyond their camp. She'd carry a stick and press quick marks into the dirt, a line here, a curve there, mimicking what she saw above, marking what changed. Certain dots grew brighter, others moved fast, and once one disappeared entirely. She stood until sunrise that night, then turned to the others and simply gestured. Something up there moved. It sounds like fiction, but isn't always. Myth was survival dressed in beauty, and these early stargazers were writing the first page with nothing but a gaze. Not all stargazers wanted meaning. Some just wanted rhythm, a pattern to honor. Sleep when the brothers cross the tree. Plant when the red eye is high. Wait, not yet. The sky isn't ready. This was time before hours, time before time. Born of sky, they believed the lights told stories. A mother who carried her lost child across the top edge of the world forever. A wolf that chased a bird with fire in its wings. 3 shapes that never moved, protecting the mountains they once loved. Was it truth? Does it matter? The stars didn't rise for explanation. They rose for continuity. Proof that today had ended. And yet, we were still here. On a fogless night, you could look at the group around that fire and see 20 humans, but no sky watcher among them, because by then, they all were. They etched grooves into caves, small repeating dots and spirals, trying, somehow, to hold the stars inside Earth. Before morning came, and when they forgot what to believe, they looked up again and remembered looking at the stars, taught them how to wonder, taught them to wait, taught them to connect gods to survival, and hunger to the passing of light. Somewhere between sundown and sunrise, stars became both calendar and comfort. Their slow, deliberate journeys across the sky offered something no fire or blade could, the possibility of understanding, something greater. And in the quiet, amidst the prehistoric hum of crickets, cold stones, and careful dreams, something beautiful happened. They felt small, but not unloved. And tonight, as your own sky darkens and your breath settles into rhythm, if you look carefully toward your ceiling, you might feel it, too, that same quiet, echoing awe that crept into the hearts of humans, who knew only Earth by day, but trusted the sky to carry them somewhere else. Each night, the sun hasn't yet crested the trees, but the river already glows. Thin streaks of rose gold stretch across its surface, reflecting the sky being born again, slowly, layer by layer. And where that water runs shallow, they gather, two figures. No words, only motion. Footsteps land gently over smooth, cold stones. They don't run. They walk as if being watched. And, in a way, they are, by the fish. Each footstep becomes an offering. I will not disturb. I come to listen. There are no rods, no nets, only handcrafted spears, sharpened steadily, edges tested against bark, bone, even silence. They grip them now loosely. The day hasn't asked for action yet. It has asked for presence. The hunters crouch, hip deep in water that feels like it belongs to something unnameable. Their breath shifts, matching the current, shallow at first, then slow, patient, because this moment is not about instinct. It's about study. A ripple flashes, a dart of silver, gone in half a blink. Still, they do not move. They do not throw. Fishing, for them, is not victory. It's asking permission. When their arms finally rise, they do so with grace. One strikes. The water kicks upward. A splash again. Nothing. The fish is gone. No frustration. No disappointment. Only breath. Rhythm. Reset. The elder nudges a pebble with their heel. Let the vibration travel. Gentle, a ripple of noise that the stones can understand. And, in turn, send downriver. Asterisk, it's okay. We belong here. Asterisk. Another chance. This time, the river answers. A glimmer beneath the reeds. Closer now. They lean. Eyes narrow. Hands still. If a blink could make noise, it would be too much. And then, a flick, and the spear lands. Not violently, but cleanly, precisely. The river coughs, then quiets again. And in their hands, a sparkled weight. A fish. Small, enough for one. But in that moment, it feels like they've been handed a blessing. The younger figure watches closely, studies the arc of the motion, the stillness before the strike, the thankfulness afterward. No cheer, no boasting, only reverence, as the fish is placed in a cloth, water dripping from its scales, like glints of old memory. The fishing continues like breath. Rise, wait, release, an ancient loop. Cast nothing. Strike carefully. Accept the result with peace. Nearby birds sing, so close yet unworried, because even they can feel the difference between hunting and harmony. By the time the sun reaches the top of the trees, they have 4 fish, 3 small ones, 1 large, but no one counts aloud. Success isn't measured in volume. It's measured in gratitude, and they leave the river as they found it, still, alive, generous. Back on dry land, they pause, looking back once, not out of need or worry, but to say in their own way, we'll return when you call us, not before. And above the river, a single fish jumps, as if to echo the reply. They were not prepared for it, but life rarely waits for readiness. It happened quietly. No lightning, no shadows in the trees, just absence. One morning she did not wake. Her hands remained soft, her breath no longer curved. And so they stopped, all of them. No food was gathered that day, no tools sharpened, no fish hunted, only breath, held longer than usual, only footsteps, softer than necessary, only eyes, searching for meaning, in the place where warmth once rested. She was young, too young to call elder, too small to be protector, but old enough that her laugh still rang in the minds of those who had caught it once, mid-firelight, mid-bite, mid-everything, a laugh like a smooth stone skipped over calm water. Now that water moved without it. No words, they didn't have them, but they had gestures, and grief found a way to gesture back. They wrapped her in a woven mat, the same one her brother used when the rains came, the one she'd once carried on her back like a shield. They placed feathers at her head, soft ones, white and gray, feathers for flight, and silence, and the idea that even heaviness deserves to be honored. Softly, one by one, they brought offerings, not because they knew rituals, not because a custom had been taught, but because their hearts still worked. A chip carving tool, her favorite stone bowl for berries, a folded animal skin she once draped around her shoulders when pretending to be a lion, and beside all these, a flower, picked from the very edge of where the forest began, its purple sharp against the dirt. They lowered her into a hollow, not deep, but dry, safe from the river, safe from the things that drag. Then came the stones, slowly stacked, carefully placed, a weight not just for the wind, but for the sorrow. The child, placing the final rock, used both hands, pressed it in, like a seal, as though it might keep memory from spilling out too soon. They didn't cry in waves or wails. Their grief did not need volume. It needed time. It needed presence. The youngest lay beside the grave for a long while, face pressed into the soil, not asleep, just close enough to remember how she once smelled, when carried under their mother's arm. And then, as the sun lowered, and the trees grew darker, they lit a single tuft of dry moss over stones. Small fire, guttering like a baby's breath, the shape of memory that refused to be spoken, so it flickered instead. One of the elders took a stick and drew a spiral in the dirt beside the fire, not for decoration, not out of habit, but because it felt true, beginning and end, looped into itself. Farewell, without forgetting. After a time, they walked away, not with haste, not with certainty, just with rhythm, because that's how time moves. After loss, and if you walk to that spot now, if you step slowly under the same trees, let your hand brush the same stones, you may find nothing left, no markings, no bones, no fire ash, but sometimes a feather still drifts there, even when birds haven't passed in hours. Just one, soft and curling downward, as if someone needed to be remembered one more time, in the quietest way possible. The world was too big to name, but not too big to feel. And the earliest humans, tucked under the lips of caves, sun-warmed rocks above, moss at their sandals, began to reach out with their eyes. But it wasn't enough. To see was to remember. To remember was to want to show. And so one picked up a stone, not sharp, not dangerous, just broken at the edge, useful. In the other hand, a lump of charcoal, hardened by last night's fire. She pressed both to the wall and began. At first it was a streak, dark, soft, pointless, but it looked back at her and stayed. So she made another, this time a curl, then a peak, then a circle. Not perfect, never perfect, only real, only hers. Others gathered in the cave mouth quietly, not speaking, not interrupting. One crouched near the torch. Another rubbed ash between their fingers absently. And soon the wall became a page, a canvas, a place not just to decorate, but to declare, we've seen things, and we refuse to let them be lost. She drew an antelope, legs too long, eyes too bright, lines swirling near its feet, to mimic movement. And though no one knew the word for run, they all recognized it when the antelope danced in curve and line. Next came hands. One person pressed their palm flat on stone. Another blew powder pigment around it, a shadow of self, a stamp, a simple, perfect truth. I was here. The drawings weren't invented. They were remembered. They had always lived somewhere, between instinct and imagination. Now they came forward. Someone traced the sun, not as it looked, but how it felt, a spiral, a flame, a pulse of heat and light, wrapped in curved lines. Another etched a woman giving birth, a curled human shape below her, followed by water lines and blooming roots. What they lacked in technique, they expressed in symbolism. And need, these marks were not entertainment. They were survival, not a body, but of meaning. When language failed, chalk and soot became the tongue. Stone, the endless listener, the child who once only watched, now pointed at a shape and clapped. No one explained it to her, but she understood, because art, before it tried to be beautiful, was made to connect. Time passed. The figures on the wall multiplied. Birds, fire, the dead remembered, the alive celebrated. One drawing looked suspiciously like the stars. They'd been watching for weeks. 3 dots shaped in a line, above the figure of a child sleeping under a tree. A message? A prayer? Or simply a comfort? Even above, we are seen. They didn't sign their names. There were no names to sign, only fingers, still stained with ash. Only eyes, wide with something close to joy, not the kind that shouts, the kind that says, I did not dream this alone. And still the cave holds us today, perhaps in a different place, perhaps erased by rain, perhaps inside you, if you've ever gazed at stars, or carved your initials into bark, just to remember you existed in that moment. That, too, was drawn a world. The fire has calmed. Its tall flames now curl into themselves, leaving behind slow embers, little hearts glowing in the dark, like stars that decided to stay behind. The world around the flame fades into black. The leaves barely rustle, and the night exhales as one. It is quiet, but not empty. This quiet has weight. It says, something is about to be remembered. And then the elder speaks, not loudly, not formally, the way a drum might sound if it could whisper, the way a song rises when it doesn't know it's being heard. His voice is slow, purposeful, not recited from memory, but summoned from it. He speaks in a rhythm older than grammar, a story with no names. But everyone listening knows who it's about. The children lean closer, wrapped in pelts. Eyes like gemstones turn to flame. The adults already know this one. They've heard the tale before, many times, but not like this, because his stories are never told the same way twice. Each version shaped by the night's air, the shape of the fire, and the weight of missing faces beside the circle. Tonight's story begins with a climb. A young boy who wanders too far, up through rocky hills, fog wrapping around his shoulders like a questioning vine. He's looking for something. What was he looking for? One child whispers. The elder smiles. He doesn't answer. Yet, he goes on. The boy hears voices on the wind. Not frightening, but familiar. He finds a cave he's never seen before, but that knows his name. Inside, glowing handprints. Drawings of creatures never seen since. Eyes drawn in spiral. A woman carved into shadow. A fire, unlit yet warm. The elder pauses. Everyone is still. Even the fire, it seems, waits for the next line. Then he says, the boy came down from the mountain, but his feet never touched the rocks again. Silence. Goosebumps. No one speaks. The younger listeners understand little, but they feel everything, because even without knowing, they've just been handed something sacred, a story that isn't about facts, but about belonging. The elder closes his eyes for a moment. He doesn't explain. He doesn't conclude, because the story doesn't end. It settles, like ash, like snow, like inheritance. This is how truth passed through time, before writing, through voice and breathing, and the way a face looked in the firelight, just after it spoke something important. A breath, a reflection, a legacy aloud. Later, when sleep comes, the child who asked the question will dream of the handprints in that cave. She will not know where the image came from, only that it feels older than the dream. And one day, years from now, she'll sit in the circle, and she'll tell a version of the story, not quite remembering the words, but remembering the fire and the way it glowed, when something worth repeating found her. And this is survival too, not just in the hunt, or the shelter, or the food cooked carefully over flame, but in the truth, that what we speak, what we choose to remember, keeps us alive. It begins with a sound, not loud, not sharp. A silence breaks. Quiet folds inward. Even the leaves pause. The birds stop. The insects skip. The fire, dimmed since morning, feels too far away. And somewhere beyond the tall grass, an intention awakens. It does not see us yet, but it smells us. It does not chase yet, but the earth beneath us begins to feel. Narrow, the first figure, barefoot, skin browned by sun, muscles tight around movement, freezes, eyes wide, knees soft, breath shallow. She doesn't point, doesn't shout. She just turns quietly, grabs the child, and runs. The others don't ask what. They trust what fear knows first. Move now. Move fast. Don't look back. Let instinct lead. Between trees, through vines, down paths not yet mapped but deeply known. Their feet slap the dirt in rhythm. Some stumble. Some leap. Bone tools fall. A satchel spills. No one stops to collect. Not yet, because now everything is about heartbeat. Behind them, a low growl, not the kind meant to scare, the kind meant to end. A predator they've never named, but always sensed. Fur thick with hunger, jaws large enough to break memories mid-neck, claws that make the dust flinch before their owners arrive. Saber-tooth, dire wolf, the kind of fear with a mouth and a plan. But we are not unarmed. No blades, no shields, but awareness and terrain. And each other. One breaks right, pulling branches in her wake, disrupting the predator's line. Another lifts the child higher across her shoulders, feet surging forward like extensions of breath. They pass through shallows, ruining scent, around large trees, creating confusion. They are not just running, they are communicating. Run left, there's cane grass. Drop now, there's rock for climbing. Follow her breath. She knows the high ground. None of these things are said aloud. They're passed through eyes, motion, rhythm, voiceless languages, as old as dirt itself. The predator gives chase, but it hesitates. It doesn't understand why the pack doesn't break, why they turn for each other, not the ground. It lunges once too far, slides in mud. The opening is brief, but the humans don't wait for a second one. They sprint through it, like water finding a crack, and disappear down the stone ridge. Into thorn brush the creature won't dare to follow. Now silence again, but richer, heavy with continued life. One by one they exhale, hands on knees, throats raw, hearts still racing, but skin cooling. The predator is gone, for now, but has given them a dose of something no fruit or fire can offer. Reminder that survival is not just a collection of skill. It is a commitment to pay attention to what doesn't want you to. In the days to come, they will draw the story. One of them will paint claw marks on a tree near the river. Another will press palm prints into red clay near their fire. The child, still shaking, will mimic the grunt of the beast, as the others laugh, not out of mockery, but relief. And later that season, they will occupy a higher shelter. They will post a silent guard, not because they're afraid, but because now they know, and sometimes knowing is louder than any victory. The hunt is over. The chase is past. And now there is stillness, but not silence, because after every hunt, a different kind of rhythm begins. Not the rhythm of war, but of work. They gather on open ground, where water runs soft over stones nearby, and the sun filters lightly through smoke-colored branches. Laid on woven grass mats, the animal rests, no longer breathing, yet offering something greater than life. A tusk still gleams. The eyes close long before the final blow. The skin still warm. It is not treated as a trophy. There is no cheering, no drums, no boasts, only gratitude, only motion. The eldest kneels first. She holds a flint in one hand, and the animal's foreleg in the other. Her fingers do not tremble. Her lips don't speak, but the gesture itself steady, slow, exact, is louder than any speech. With the first cut, the tribe breathes in sync, not a gasp, not relief, but respect. It is not a wound. It is an unwinding, peeling back the gift layer by layer, learning again how much can be offered by one being that no longer moves. The skin is peeled back gently, not for cruelty, but for clothing, binding, warmth, flesh for food, bones for tools, tendons for string, horns for carving, fat for fire. Nothing wasted, nothing named, only used, carefully, intentionally. The younger ones help now. They pass baskets, rinse the organs, recite without knowing the first lessons of utility, the sacred routine of turning resource into ritual. At midday, the fire deepens. Stones are lined in a half circle. Thick slices of meat are laid gently over green wood, smoking slowly. There is no seasoning. The fire is the only spice needed. And while it cooks, they do not wander. They stay close. To remember, to learn. One cuts the liver with care. She was taught this is where memory lives. You must treat it like a journal page. Open it clean. Say what matters. Leave behind what is not. She folds a soft tissue into a leaf and places it in a hollow on the riverbank. A returning. Another wraps bone marrow in bark and buries it under charcoal. To harden, to become a tool, or a sound maker, or perhaps something not yet imagined, because in this time, the line between use and meaning is always soft. Above them, vultures circle, but do not come near. Even they feel the pause in the air around the fire. That pause is not fear. It is acknowledgement. You do not intrude, when gratitude is still being folded into breath. Later, as dusk stains the sky, the first piece is shared, not given to who caught the beast, but to the smallest, the slowest, the hungriest. That's how survival wins. When strength protects, not just provides. They chew slowly. Each bite is worn like cloth. Chewing is not just digestion. It is connection. Your teeth pray. Your throat remembers. Your body agrees to carry this gift forward. That night, their stomachs full, but not hard. Their hands raw, but not worn. They sleep beside what has fed them, knowing that tomorrow they will leave behind bones, buried with intention, under stones marked not with names, but with meaning, because to eat was not just to live. It was to accept, to honor, to begin again. The sky had been whispering warnings all day. Nothing loud, just shade where golden light should linger. Bird calls that ended early. Leaves that face the wrong way. Before the wind remember how to move. They had seen this before. Not often, but enough to understand. The meaning that comes without words. A meaning written in cloud sent humidity. Change. The sun disappeared before the horizon invited it, and the air grew still, not the kind of stillness that comforts, the kind that braces. Then came the first drop, not gentle, cold, exact, singular. It struck like a stone against bare skin, a memory descending from sky, rather than a message. Then another, and then many. They didn't run. Running doesn't solve arrival. Instead, they move with intention, gathering what the earth might steal next. Skins, baskets, tools, dried roots, coals from the fire, cradled in ash bundles, as if carrying a sleeping infant. A few children pointed upward, still amazed at how water fell from nowhere. But the elders, they moved, and the others followed their feet. The storm wasn't here yet, but it was close. Its breath kissed the tops of tree canopies before it roared wide. They knew the ridge just beyond the rock wall would hold. They reached it fast, not panicked. Practiced. Stone overhangs, tucked into land like bones into skin. They had used this place before. The first voices came not in speech, but in breathing. The sound of bodies arranging beside one another, pulling tightly wrapped skins over heads and knees. Soft murmurs rising like steam. and the quiet hush of someone rubbing the last spark to live. Under a shield of bark, rain came in waves. Wind asked to come in, but stone said no. And so they listened to the beat of it, to thunder that rolled like drums from a sky too far to accuse, to possibility. And for a while, they were inside it, not separate, not untouched. Inside it, one elder reached for a child's hand and pressed it to the damp stone wall behind them. Feel this. This is what holds us. This is how the earth tucks us in, when teeth of wind snap at night and fire whimpers. This is what listening buys you. A baby made cooing sounds. No one taught them. They made the storm sound friendly. So everyone smiled, just briefly. But that was enough. And then they lit the small fire. Low flames, practical warmth, not for ceremony, only for skin and food and hope. Its smell mixed with the wet breath of moss and stone. And there, tucked along the shelter's wall, someone hummed. Not loud, not even melodic, just tone, something for the wind to chase away, or carry back stronger. A note, like folded memory, like usefulness with emotion, a tether to peace. While chaos beat on the stone like a test, sleep came slowly, but not fearfully. Rain has a way of making the brain rewind to rest. Everything sounded like breathing, once the thunder wandered off to hunt quieter hills. And come morning, the world would steam under first light. Grass would lean heavy with dew, and their footprints, those they made on the way into safety, would still be there, not washed away, as if the storm, too, respected those who know how to listen and stay together. Love did not arrive quietly, but it also did not announce itself. It crept in like firelight, slow at first, but warming everything it touched. In those earliest days of humankind, there were no whispered promises, no carved rings, no songs with chorus, but there was rhythm, and rhythm became the first language of longing. When the rains passed and the rivers calmed, and the trees bore fruit again, and the wind turned soft, they danced, not every day, not always together, but sometimes when the fire pulsed, just right, and breath was unlabored, and laughter came easily. The bodies did what even the mind could not name. They circled. It began with one, a figure rising from the mat of pressed ferns, ankles brushed in ochre, hands lifted in slow spiral. No words needed, only invitation. Then another rose, not mirroring, but responding, a tilt of the head, a sway at the shoulder. The space between them became the message. There was no choreography, no steps passed down, just instinct, a knowing in the hips, the placement of feet, the pulse of the ground between them, as it remembered what existence had always been heading toward. Others gathered to watch, eyes gently flickering in fire glow, smiles hidden behind bones of fruit. No one interrupted. This was not performance. It was permission. Her shoulders rolled. He dropped lower. Their knees touched, once, then again. She tossed a string of feathers into the fire. He struck stone together, shower of sparks. Not for light, but for moment. This wasn't romance. Not yet. This was recognition. The deepest human truth. I see you, and I choose you. Some rituals carry beads. Others exchanged painted stones. Some locked foreheads. Others simply offered space beside a log at sunrise. Whatever the symbol, it always meant the same thing. Survival will be better if you are near. And in that one dance, joined at the chest, not yet in body, they learned about something older than fire, peace, wrapped in motion. Later that night, they'd walk together, in the morning mist, stretching hide along branches, to form a new space, carving marks in fresh bark, circling circles into soil, to say, this is where we try together. They did not woo with promises, only with presence. No declarations were made, because every gesture already meant something. The way they stood in rain together, the the way one offered both halves of a root, without biting first, the way sleep came easier, next to a familiar heartbeat. You could not teach it. You could only return to it. They would not say, "I love you," but her hand would grip his when the wolves watched too long. He would carry her tools when her knee failed for a week, and both would lie a little closer. Each time they didn't have to. So the dance was not for show. It was for survival, for connection, for continuation, a choice made, in body, before language, caught up, and sometimes, late at night, another would rise, not to dance, but to remember that they once did, with painted feathers, or a stone smoothed by her fingers that he still carried, at his waist, slight, simple, sacred. Can you imagine living through a storm like that, with no walls, no roof, no voice to describe it, only instinct? What moment from this journey would have felt natural to you? The fire? The chase? The quiet rhythm of a carved story drawn in ash? Speech Balloon, let us know in the comments. If you had to live 4.7 million years ago, what skill would you bring to the circle? They felt it long before they saw it. First, the wind shifted, sharp with dust, heavy with scent, musky, ancient, alive. Something large and many. Then the ground softened, vibrated, a low pulse, rhythmic, like thunder remembering how to walk. They stood atop small stones, on ridges of dry grass and broken root, in absolute stillness, not waiting to kill, not even hoping to get closer, just to witness. And then they arrived, a line crawling across the horizon, dark bodies, bright tusks, huge, moving hearts. The herd came like a wave, slow in speed, fast in memory. Mammoths, boars, antelope in hundreds, moving not for panic, but for promise. They followed nothing except the ancient map behind their eyes. That told them where food was, where green was returning, where old bones were buried. Dust curled from their feet, as if the land was exhaling beneath each hoof. The humans did not blink. Children sat cross-legged. Mothers cradled babies with one hand and pointed with the other. A father rested his hand on his son's sternum. Feel this. This is the earth remembering. No one spoke, but something was said. They were watching more than survival. They were watching cycles. Life that moved in loops, older than language, and bigger than hunger. This was not the first time it had happened, and it would not be the last. The herd had stirred the land last season, and the one before, and the one before that, always at this time, always between fire season and flood. One day, they would learn to follow it, shadow its path, take just what they needed. Never more, but not yet. Today was not for chasing. Today was for understanding. A girl near the back drew her finger in the dust. One circle, then another, then a line that moved from both. It looked like nothing, but to her, it was a shape of how they moved, a trail that felt both distant and known. Big animals, bigger meaning. Some of the elders, the ones who had walked farther than the rest, closed their eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. A leafless tree near the edge cracked once, and a flock of birds rose up like memory taking wing. Still, the herd did not scatter. Their calm felt holy. One man placed his hand over his own heart and tapped it once, then once more at the same pace. That's how the hooves felt, on the earth, like heartbeat, like presence, like homecoming. It wasn't just about the animals. It was about when they moved, why they knew, how they marked time, without learning it. One child asked, quietly, will they come again next season? An older voice, breathy but firm. They always do. They always have. And in those tracks, legacy. In their silence, certainty. In their movement, memory. And here on the ridge, with sun scraping low across eyes too wide to blink, early humans became more than gatherers. They became observers, philosophers, time travelers, by simply watching. Something older than gods. Return. They didn't know it, but they had seen a calendar. in motion, their first year, their first rhythm. And so they closed their eyes in reverence, not for what was passing, but what would return. Another day has ended. They have eaten. Their bellies are full. The hunt has passed. The shadows no longer chase them. The world is, for tonight, still. And so they sit or lie, arms folded behind heads, toes cooling near a fire that has stopped roaring and now holds only small, beautiful light. Above them, infinity. Everywhere else, silence, except for breath, the fire, crickets playing the stars' music through tall grass, the occasional stretch of bone or yawn from someone nearby. No one needs to move now. No one needs to speak. This moment isn't for stories. It isn't for survival. It is just for being. The stars don't shout. They blink. They wait. And the people below them, barefoot and bound only to each other, recognize something deeper than pattern above. They see their own story, as if it were being told to them, from a shape of endless glittering dots drawn in soft charcoal across deep velvet. Children lift their heads first. Their eyes stretch wider, mirroring the wide-open nothingness above. And in that nothingness, they feel something. They don't know to call it awe. They don't know to name it longing. They only know this, that the dark above them feels older, and it does not feel alone. One child opens his hand toward the sky. He waves at a star, then pulls his hand back quickly, not from fear, but from joy. He thinks maybe the star winked back. And maybe it did. An elder speaks softly, just one phrase, pointing upward with the back of her fingers. She says, "That one came before you, and it will wait after you." The child looks at the flicker she's chosen. It blinks, then doesn't. He nods, as if he understands forever, without needing to count it. Someone tosses a dry twig into the fire. It pops. The star stays silent. One person hums, just slightly. No melody, no performance. Just vibration in the throat, offered into night. As a gift, no one joins the song, but all stand inside its silence, wrapped in it, like furs warm on their shoulders. They are not afraid tonight. The dark does not try to eat them. It hugs them instead. And the stars, so brilliantly far, feel near, closer than they should. You see, the people didn't always need to know the stars. They only needed to trust. They were meant to watch them. That sky watching was a kind of prayer, not for gods, not even for understanding, just for intimacy with existence. And so they lie, shoulders touching, bodies breathing, minds softened by smoke and story. And each person begins to see shapes in the stars, in the gaps between, animals, hands, spirals. Sometimes they match. Sometimes they contradict. But that's all right. Stargazing was never meant to be agreed upon, only shared. And tonight, they do share it. Covered in soot, eyes quietly reflecting the same heavens. Their great-great-children will bow under. They sleep there, just like that, under stars still blinking, beneath galaxies that will take centuries to name, but always knew them first. The river is not the enemy. It does not rage. It does not roar. But it moves. And movement, when water decides to part the earth, demands attention. It must be studied, tested, remembered. They found it at dawn, nestled between two banks heavy with trees, its surface curved with current, wide enough to require decision, but not so deep it could not be crossed, if done together. They stood at the edge, feet half in mud, watching it roll, like thought across silence. There were no boats, no bridges, only people and the things they carried. A wrapped bundle of smoldering coals sat atop dry bark. The fire must survive. It could not get wet. A child was held to a hip. Tools were attached to rope. Spears packed in skins to float stitched ends upward like reeds. They would cross together, or they would turn back. And today, no one turned. The elder touched the water first, sinking his heels slowly to test the pull. It was cold, not cruel, but convincing. The signal was given. not with a shout, but the tilt of the head, the bend of the knees. This meaning passed from head to hand, to shoulder, until the group began shifting, closer to the edge, the first step forward, followed by another, not side by side, but in rhythm, a small column, measured, strong. Each foot found rock, each shift in current, meant grip, lean, pause. The river watched, unchallenged. Halfway through, a moment, a child slipped sideways, legs caught against a drift. Not deep, not dangerous, but unfamiliar, and without reaction time, the woman beside him reached. Her hand grabbed his arm, just before panic swallowed rhythm. There were no tears, just rebalance, reconnection, and the boy knew he would not be allowed to fall alone. One by one, they placed their palms on each other's backs. As they stepped deeper, they pushed bundles forward. They pulled others across swell. Rough ropes, soft gasps, laughter now. When someone's heel tickled by a darting fish broke the tension, the river continued to move, unbothered, carving meaning in slow spirals below. And then they reached the other side. Exhale, bare feet pressed into new mud, heels greeted dry land, as if it were a friend long missed. But there was no cheering, no victory shout, only the calm awareness that something difficult had been done correctly. Together, the fire was pulled from its bark cradle, still breathing, still ready. They fed it a leaf, and it answered with smoke. They would camp there, not because it was the plan, but because crossing takes something. It uses a piece of you and says, "Rest now. You've done well." Later, one child drew her heel in the dirt, etching lines like waves, then little footprints through them. Another traced her body with river clay, marking shoulders and arms, turning her skin into soft ceremonial armor. Her steps would remind her of water, long after it had forgotten her name. Crossing was not just survival. It was choreography. It was ceremony, a test performed, only if done shoulder to shoulder, palm to palm, a bridge of bodies, not made of stone or wood, but of trust. It began with a storm, not above, but within, a sky grayed with secrets, a forest hushed by tension, as if something just under the skin of the world was ready to emerge. And somewhere in the underbrush, beneath a dead, tilted tree, two stones met, in anger or in need, or maybe on accident, but they met, and from them, a spark, tiny, brief, almost nothing, but enough to be seen. The human stepped back, stared, blinking, chest rising shallow, not in fear, in disbelief. The spark had vanished, but it had been real. That moment mattered. That moment lingered. He tried again, and again, stone against stone, with dry and waiting beneath. Each clack, like a forgotten word being formed for first time, a mouth too old to remember how to speak. Then, on the ninth strike, one breath, one ember, like a breath from inside the planet. It flickered, curled inward on itself, then caught the edge of dried grass beneath it, a shimmer, a gasp, and then flame. It wasn't bright, it wasn't large, but it rose, alive and real, orange like the belly of a beast, gold edged with movement. It danced, slowly, as if watching herself in her own reflection. The man didn't move. He simply watched, transfixed, remembering a light he had never seen before, but that somehow had always lived inside his body. Others found him later. The sky was pouring now, the forest slick with dripping ferns, bending branches, but the fire was not afraid because he had protected it. He had shielded it with bark, with bone, with breath. He kept it alive long enough to make it familiar. The others knelt beside it, not to touch, not to feed, not at first. They treated it like a baby or a god, palms outward, slow breath. Each warmth that brushed their faces felt like a new name, being whispered over skin for the first time. Then came laughter, because they hadn't known. They hadn't understood what nature had been hiding until it shared this. And now it was theirs. He dipped his fingers toward it, not into the flame, but beside, warmed them, lifted them to someone beside him. They copied him. And now the tribe was changing, not because they'd built a house, not because they'd hunted better, because they no longer feared the night. The stars above watched their flames, as if seeing themselves reflected for the first time from below. They sat beside it. They slept beside it. And when something rustled in the forest, several nights later, they didn't run. They raised brands from the fire, and the beast blinked from the shadows and turned away. Fire had arrived, not as a tool, not as warmth, not even as safety, but as home. The moment the fire was born, so were they, a new kind of human, braver, brighter, no longer raw in the bones, but glowing from within. Fear had finally found its rival. And when you light your own flame, a match, a spark, a stove in your kitchen, know that you're repeating something sacred, a ritual made not by fire alone, but by the hope that once lived in striking stone against the unknown. They did it, not for glory, not for progress, not for anything loud. They simply made it through another day, and now their bodies soften, knees uncoil, spines curve against cool sand. No need for centuries tonight. The fire is enough. The sky is enough. Each person lies close to someone, some paired, some alone, but always together, pelts pulled gently across shoulders. The last bites have been eaten. It's quiet now, but not empty. You can hear a far-off owl, tree frogs, the rhythmic gasp of reeds moving side to side. But the fire, steady, no longer demanding attention, but peacefully standing watch. Its shadows no longer wild. They stretch slowly, across cheeks and toes. A child curls up on her mother's chest. The heartbeat under her ear slows with hers. Now one rhythm. She sucks a thumb, not from fear, but from sheer remembering. A man reaches up once, his hand tracing part of the spinning night above, as if mapping a story. Only the stars can finish. He never touches anything, but you can tell he feels everything. No tents, no castle walls, but still a fortress of breath, because all around them is night, but also everything they've earned. Safety now comes not from weapons, but from willing closeness, from the heartbeat of many, pressed so quietly into the earth that even the wind folds its hand for a while and listens. Above them, stars spin, holding secrets no one asked for, yet still grateful for the company. Because humans, in their stillness, in their listening, make it audience. No thoughts of tomorrow. Tomorrow isn't real yet. Only breath, only darkness, only the warmth of people who have stood beside you when the storm came, when the fire woke, when you slipped in the river. Now they are here, and so are you. They do not dream in words, but pulse in color. They dream of rivers returning, of mammoths passing slowly, of birdsong drifting into the warmth of morning. And when the sun begins to return, quietly, as softly as they once lit fire, they'll wake, one at a time, not from alarm, but from light, touching an eyelid at just the right angle. And tomorrow, they will live again, with spears, and hunger, and stories, and songs, and all of it will be enough, because tonight they sleep beneath the stars. If this journey quieted something inside you, let that stillness stay. And if you want more stories like this one, soft, steady, and sacred, hit subscribe. We'll let the stars know you're coming back.